Support for Faith on Trial and Iowa Catholic Radio provided in part by Imogene Ingredients.
Our freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. It's time to hear from the top Christian litigators in the nation who have come forward to tell us the truth and help us defend our faith.
Hear ye, hear ye. All rise. Faith on Trial with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Mano, is in session.
And welcome. We're glad you joined us today. I'm Deacon Mike Mano, your host, with Gina Knoll here in the studio. How are you this morning, Gina?
I am doing well, Deacon Mike.
Very good. How was your week?
Oh, by the way.
Oh, yes.
Fall is here.
Yes, fall is here.
And Mother Nature has decided to show us that fall is here.
One of the nice things about fall is I like to open up the windows.
Isn't that
and air
nice?
Out the house and everything. Yeah.
Not so much. Yeah, airing out the house is nice. I like the alleviation from the hum of the air conditioner.
Right.
That it's so peaceful without that.
Right.
Although I did appreciate the nice cool air it produces.
Yeah, I like the air conditioner too, but you go half the year with the air conditioner on, half the year with the heater on, and you like to open up and just get the fresh air in for a while. We've been doing that.
That's right.
What we've been doing.
Did you start your St. Michael novena this week?
Yes.
Isn't that a beautiful prayer?
Luann and I do it together at night. And it is very beautiful. It is very beautiful.
Well, I'm hoping that we have thousands or hundreds of thousands of prayer warriors throughout this country.
Well, we certainly need it because we have a lot of problems that we need a lot of prayers to help us with. And,
I picture you all joining us this week and on to St. Michael's
feast day. On to St. Michael's feast day, which is not this Friday, but the following Friday, September 29th. And, of course, we're having our Mass at St. Augustine's at 6 o'clock that day.
6 o'clock Friday night, so after work, drop by.
Drop by. You'll like it. I think we may even have a potluck after that. So.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah,
I'll have to watch the bulletin this week. Check that one out.
Come on in. All right. We got an interesting program today. We are bringing on board somebody that we've not had before, Judicial Watch. And we're going to talk to Chris Farrell there, who is the Director of Research on this new, George Soros School of Journalism. If he hasn't screwed up the criminal justice system enough, now he's going to screw up what's left of a bad product right now.
Well, wasn't he responsible? I mean, I think we did a story at one point that or even a squib, that George Soros has been pumping money in to buy the Hispanic radio stations around the country so that he can direct the message the way he'd like to
his
those
Marxist,
listeners.
Communist message. Yeah.
Yeah, so now he needs people to staff it, apparently. He's funded a journalism school. Very clever man.
And then after Chris, we're going to have our old friend Brad Dacus from the Pacific Justice Institute. They just opened up an office in Iowa. We're going to talk to him about that. We're going to talk to him about a new law in California that requires judges to consider the parent's gender affirmation policy when deciding custody agreements. So,
that's been in the news this week quite a bit.
And we've been trying to get him on for a week on this. He couldn't make it last week, so we pushed him back to this week. And
I feel like the California legislature has even pushed more legislation in this direction, even while this is still bubbling in the court system.
They are crazy. I mean, you can't describe it any other way. They are just simply crazy. And I'll tell you what, if we ask Brad when he gets on here, I bet he'll tell you the same thing. They are just nuts down there.
Well,
and they're ruining that state.
Oh, yes.
They're ruining that state.
I did hear an interview with a Sacramento legislator who is now being very vocal about the destruction of Sacramento by the homeless and some of these other policies, these drug policies.
And the state's attorney in that area is suing over that.
In Sacramento?
In Sacramento.
Oh, I hadn't heard that lawsuit. Yeah. So things are a-changing, right?
They are. All right, do we have a prayer to open us up with?
I do. Prayer for peace today. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. God of peace, bring your peace to our violent world. Peace in the hearts of all men and women, and peace among the nations of this earth. Turn your way of love to those whose hearts and minds are consumed with hatred. Strengthen us all in hope, and give us the wisdom and courage to work tirelessly for a world where true peace and love reign in the hearts of all, among nations, and in the hearts of all. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Jeannie, you're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio, and we will be right back after these messages with Chris Farrell from Judicial Watch. And we are back. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio, and we have with us right now Chris Farrell, who is the Director of Research at Judicial Watch. And Chris, I want to talk to you about something that is at least as near and dear to me as a former journalist, is the sad state of journalism. Couldn't get any worse, I don't think, but now we have George Soros entering the picture.
Yeah, I can tell you that we've done a bunch of work uncovering the activities of the Open Society Foundations and things that they fund and try to influence. There's really a revolving door. There's this nexus of both personnel and money between the Soros Foundation, or the Open Society Foundations, which is just one of the Soros operations, and the U.S. government in particular. That's one disturbing trend. But the other one is their influence on various educational institutions. And in particular, what I guess we're talking about today is their efforts to subvert or to twist traditional journalism into something that they're calling the Solidarity Journalism Initiative at the University of Texas. And this is an effort not to uncover facts and do straight up reporting and let the public decide what's going on. This is their effort to shape narrative, and it is not so much journalism as it is training in Marxist propaganda.
I think you're right, and I'll tell you, this is close to me because, as I pointed out before, before I became a lawyer, I was a journalist, and I still am a journalist because of my writing in that. But it seems to me that what they're talking about here is really Marxist propaganda, because there's one thing that I learned in journalism school almost the first week was facts matter: who, what, when, where, why, and how. And an objective report on what is actually happening. That's not what they're talking about, though.
That is correct. This is, in fact, one of the leaders of this at the University of Texas, Austin. They've got this thing called the Solidarity Journalism Initiative, and that's the program. But the leader of it, or the director, is a purported professor at the university there, who has a long, and you can read the column, you can read what her position is, but she says that solidarity, meaning this initiative, this viewpoint that they have, eclipses or overrides objectivity as journalism's dominant ideal. That's her expression. I'm quoting it. And the idea behind this, it's really super lefty Marxist propaganda, is that, here's another great lie, social justice. There's no such thing. There's justice, period.
I agree with you on that.
Start adding on various adjectives and adverbs to justice. You're pushing a leftist propaganda line. Unfortunately, a lot of Christians fall for that. Social justice is we're going to correct all the wrongs in the world. Well,
social justice is an oxymoron.
Justice, you don't need to put an adjective on it. Nonetheless, they're trying to shape language and tell stories in a way that distorts and really, it's psychological conditioning. It's what it really boils down to. This is an effort to influence not just the journalists, but the general public into buying a line of really Marxist leftist baloney.
To be presented as news.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
This is happening. This is also happening. I mean, this is journalism, but you can dial it down to an elementary school class when it comes to teachers and instruction. You take a word problem where, Johnny and his parents drive 50 miles to the amusement park. They're halfway home. How many miles have they driven? And teachers don't take that as a word problem. They turn it into, well, listen, kids, why are they driving? Why aren't they taking public transportation? Hey, kids, how many of you can't afford to go to an amusement park? I mean, so the teachers will take a straight-up word problem, and they'll politicize it and turn it into a social justice narrative and they're indoctrinating kids. And they're not teaching how to calculate the number of miles driven. They turn it into a grudge match. They turn it into all this sort of disparity focusing efforts that are designed to create this leftist narrative of the oppressor and the oppressed. And that's an example out of a elementary school classroom, but this is now up at the university level, right? So for context, I just want to point out that I taught journalism law at George Mason University in Virginia for 5 years. So I have direct firsthand knowledge of what the journalism teaching experience is in a university setting. And I know what the goals and objectives of these sort of Open Society Foundations people are. And I've seen it in action. So I know the teaching environment, and I know what they are trying to advance.
So, Chris, I'm curious. This whole story is very curious to me because we did a story on the program at one point about the Soros organizations buying up some of the Hispanic radio stations throughout Florida and other parts of the country. So it makes sense that this is the next step. Is this the only school, the University of Texas, that we know of that he is becoming a part of or funding? And is this Anita Varma, the professor who has put this curriculum together, a part of the Soros organizations or the Open Society? How did he choose? Do you have any background on that?
So one of the things that they're quite good at is having all sorts of affiliates and associates and sort of aligned groups. So you can often draw dotted or dashed lines, but you can't always draw a straight, solid line between the various actors and characters. And that's one of the ways that they operate, is almost in a sort of cellular network, like really like communist cells, frankly. So I don't know the particulars concerning Ms. Varma and what her direct affiliations or indirect ones are. I can tell you, to your opening remark about Soros buying up radio stations, that was a knee-jerk reaction from the left because they got wind. This all started in Miami, actually. The left got wind that the Salem radio network, a very fine Christian evangelical radio network across the country, that they were interested in purchasing this kind of flagship station in Miami. And as soon as the word got out that these Christian conservatives were interested in purchasing the station, well, that set off a bidding war. And in came the left and, got into direct competition in an effort to stop or to preclude the growth of Christian stations.
George Soros seems to have his fingers in almost everything, and we're watching around the country to see what is happening with our criminal justice system because he's placed so many county prosecutors in office. As a matter of fact, we have a county attorney here that was elected with his support. Why don't we just step back a minute, and if you can explain to us what his Open Society is and what, in effect, he's trying to do, because it's beyond the judicial system and it's beyond journalism. There's more to it than that. And quite frankly, I find the silence of the media to be deafening about this.
Yeah, and that's part of the effort too, right? If it's not reported on and it's not discussed, or if it is discussed and you paint the persons discussing it as sort of lunatic fringe haters, you could be accused of all sorts of isms, right? You can be racist and homophobic and anti-Semitic and every kind of slur one can imagine is normally thrown at anybody who points at this and says, wow, this appears to be a multi-billion-dollar operation, and they have a very aggressive agenda, and they're very organized, and they seem to try to place people and money at critical junctures. If you point at that, then you're called all sorts of names and accused of all sorts of horrific things. But it's really a globalist agenda. They love open borders, particularly along our southern border in Mexico, but they've advanced open borders in Europe as well. And we've seen the consequences in Europe where, Germany's taken in roughly 1.5 million persons without a single vote. It was a stroke of the pen by Angela Merkel, who was the chancellor at the time, back in 2015, 2016, but Germany's feeling the consequences of it now. When you have a country like Hungary, which the left loves to smear, they love to call Prime Minister Orban authoritarian and all sorts of other things that are absolute lie. Hungary very proudly proclaims itself and its constitution to be a Christian nation, and they reject uncontrolled migration, and they reject the whole gender ideology coming out of the European Union. Hungary actually asked voters, do you want the European Union LGBTQ curriculum in your school, or do you want parents to be in charge of education? And upwards in the 90th percentile, the results came back for the 4 questions asked on that issue, and Hungarian voters said that, no, we'll take control of that, thank you. Parents are in charge. And since they rejected the gender ideology being forced by the European Union shut down billions of euros in support for Hungary that they've been paying into. So, I mean, this is an organized operation. This is not just sort of randomly occurring, odd coincidences. Open Society Foundation has really stoked racial disharmony. They funded the Black Lives Matter movement. They supported groups that were involved in the Ferguson, Missouri riots. They meddle in elections and try to weaken election systems here in the United States by some goals and objectives about registration and late voting and absentee voting, all the sort of mischief that makes people wonder if elections are legitimate. And they've attacked Second Amendment protections here as well. So they've got an agenda. You can read it for yourself. I mean, this is not a secret. They have a website where they lay out all their goals. Judicial Watch has done a lot of reporting on this. But, they have a view, they have a vision that is distinctly, I say, almost polar opposite to a lot of the constitutional freedoms that you and I cherish.
Right. You mentioned your organization, Judicial Watch, and this is the first time that we've had somebody from Judicial Watch on. So why don't we take just a couple of minutes to explain to our listeners what Judicial Watch is and what it is that you do?
Sure. So Judicial Watch promotes integrity and accountability in government, politics, and the law. We do it. We've been doing it for 27 years, and I've been working there for 24 of the 27. I'm in my 25th year now working there. I head up the Research and Investigations Division of the organization. We make very aggressive use of the open records laws, the Freedom of Information Act, and various state laws that are like that. We also sue on constitutional issues. And what we really want to do is educate the public about the operations of government, what the government is or isn't doing for you. We like to get records of documents from the government so you can see what they're doing. What are they up to? And then there are instances where public officials are engaged in corrupt activities or abusing their office in some way, and then we sue them. We go to court and we try to represent the interests of the American public. And so that's what we do. We're not a single-issue advocacy group. We're not all about one particular topic or one public policy issue or another. There's a whole host of things that we pursue. And all the records and documents that we get, we put online so you can read what's going on. You may remember very famously back in 2016 that Hillary Clinton was running her own email server. She wasn't using the government ones. She was communicating with all sorts of folks on her own terms. And the only reason you know that Hillary Clinton had an email server is because of the work of Judicial Watch.
Good work.
Yes.
Very important information.
So let me ask you the loaded question here, as we're a
Sure.
religious station. What do you see as we're looking at George Soros and these people on the left and the open borders, the Open Society program for religious liberty? Because it seems to me that one of the things that they attack are those things that we hold in most value, family organization, worshiping God freely, and things like that.
Yeah, I would say that they're antithetical to that. They really have a Marxist agenda. So they seek to destabilize and really deconstruct the family unit. Their version or their explanation or definition of a family would have your hair standing on end. They would view the Catholic Church as a rigid, patriarchal, blah, 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 effort to suppress the masses. You're peddling the opium of the masses. That would be their approach. And you're caught up in rigid dogma that is, something from, 500 years ago. And so they, in my view, in my interpretation of a lot of what they advance, or if you found a Catholic that was a supporter, they would come out of the sort of liberation theology school of Catholic thinking and writing. And so, if that's what you're looking for, that's what you can find coming out of the Open Society foundations.
Yeah, and that's something I think John Paul II condemned, didn't he? The liberation theology.
Yeah, there might be a problem with the current occupant of the seat, but setting that aside, there's what they stand for is a radical, militant, social justice, warrior mindset. That, again, it comes out of the critical theory school, right, of the Frankfurt School.
Right, the Frankfurt
it's
School.
Deconstructing all that is good in Western civilization. That's what they're looking for.
Right, and that goes back to Marx and Engels as well.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the interesting thing to me is that in all of these divisive ideologies, the one word they use quite a bit, and I read through the curriculum that in your article that Nita Varma from the University of Texas has produced in the journalism school, the word solidarity is used in every one of their descriptions, and yet the philosophy that she teaches is incredibly divisive. It teaches us to look for the differences in everything that we do, and your truth and my truth, and never the truth.
Keep them all pitted
Correct.
against one another, and we'll prevail, right?
Yeah. So,
sitting in front of me right now is a document from 1959. It is the good old Un-American Activities Committee of the House of Representatives talks about language as a communist weapon, and there's a Austrian PhD who came to America before World War II, a guy named Stefan Possony, Possony, who's written a bunch of great things. He's now deceased, of course, but this 1959 document on language as a communist weapon is extraordinarily useful and helpful, and it explains to you how the left will try to capture a word like solidarity and use it as a dividing wedge, which doesn't make sense because it's supposed to mean unity, right?
Exactly.
And instead, they twist it and pervert it into something else.
1984 in real life.
Exactly.
Is that document on your website?
That particular document isn't. That's just something of my own personal, my own personal collection that is worthwhile to read. Yeah, I think you could probably go online and find a copy of it, or I know for a fact you can find the writings of Stefan. It's Stefan. Last name is Possony, Possony. Brilliant man, and he knows of what he writes, and so he very clearly lays out this use of language by communists as a weapon. And in the late 1950s, early 1960s, he's writing about all the sort of psychological warfare tactics that were used then that we now today accept as totally normal.
They're winning.
Correct.
They're winning. And unfortunately, we're losing time. we're out of time here, Chris.
It's fascinating information.
Yeah, we'll have you back and talk about some of this in more detail at another time. But again, before we go, why don't you give us that website again and how we can get a hold of you and see what Judicial Watch is up to?
Sure. The best thing to do, it's all one-stop shopping. Go to the website. You'll see a ton of important information up there. It's Judicial Watch, all together, one word, judicialwatch.org, O-R-G. And I hope that your listeners go there and check us out, and they'll find all sorts of great information.
Very good. Chris Farrell, who is the Director of Research at Judicial Watch, thank you very much for joining us today. We certainly appreciate it. And again, we will have you back. We'll go into all this stuff in more detail, especially as we get closer to the election, because this is something that people need to be aware of. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us today. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio, and we will be right back after these messages. And we're back. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio, and right now we have with us Brad Dacus, our old friend from the Pacific Justice Institute, who's just opened up a new office in Iowa. Brad, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing just great. Thank you.
So first of all, tell us about the office that you opened up in Iowa. You've got offices all over, but it seems like most of the offices you've had have been on what we would call the left coast. But now you've got one in Iowa. Where is that located, and how is it doing?
Yeah, my understanding, the office is in Iowa City, if I'm not mistaken, and it's doing just great. The attorney there has experience. He's a litigator, and he's ready to go to bat for the religious freedom, parents' rights, sanctity of human life for everyone there in the state of Iowa. And we're really glad to have him join our team. It's going to be a very important office, located a very central part of the country, and of course, everyone knows Iowa is a state of great influence in the presidential elections, and has actually sometimes been a bellwether of positive new trends in terms of education and other topics. And we are very excited to have that office there. We already have cases there in the state of Iowa, and that's why we had to open the office. It was just a pragmatic necessity because of what we have taking place there in Iowa.
Now, the next question I have is, when are you going to come for the grand opening and cut the ribbon?
Yeah, if I have time, I would love to be able to do that kind of a ceremony. But I just came back last night from to Arizona, Tucson, and before that, I was on a speaking tour in New York and New Jersey. And so we've got we have a lot going on, but I would love the opportunity to come back to Iowa in the not too distant future.
Well, we know you're busy and you've been on the program many times, but you're the only person I think we've ever interviewed in an airport terminal. I remember one time you were in an airport terminal, we were interviewed, and then they called your plane and you had to go.
Yes, you are very generous with your time and information for us. Thank you.
Well, thank you. My next flight leaves in 2 hours, so I've got some time to spare.
Got a little bit of time.
Yes.
All right. You're out in California, and that's maybe not an easy place to live anymore. They just passed a new law out there involving gender affirmation by parents in custody disputes. You want to explain to us what that is all about and where that may be taking us nationwide ultimately?
Yeah, it's very, very disturbing. What it says is that if you have two parents and the divorce, and they have a custody issue, or so say they're never were married and they have a custody dispute issue, and one parent is saying, hey, yeah, we think it's same-sex sex acts are great. We think that kids who want to change their gender, cut off their body parts, stick them with hormones for the rest of their life, and make them permanently sterilized. We think that's great. And then you have the other spouse who says, no, I believe that's wrong. I believe that's those sex acts and all prior to marriage with the opposite sex is wrong. It's immoral. I believe it's not healthy to encourage confusion in a child. It's going to result in terrible statistical tragedy before the age of 30, probable death before the age of 30. This law says that if in that scenario, the judge is to give preference to the parent, to the former and not the latter, to the parent who wants to encourage and affirm same-sex sex acts, who wants to encourage and affirm gender confusion. That's the parent who would get preference against the parent who has a much more sane and probable more moral, even religious background. It's a terrible, terrible law. It's hideous, it's twisted, and it's very indicative, unfortunately, of the kind of people who are dominating the state legislature in the state of California.
We keep seeing the name of this Senator Scott Wiener comes up over and over again in these things. We're almost like we know him here, but it looks like he was one of the ones behind this.
Right. Yeah. Wiener's been very problematic for those who value religious freedom, parental rights, sanctity of human life. He is pushing the envelope in accordance with the radical left and their agenda to destroy and dismantle our freedoms under the Constitution, but also the moral structure and of the family and the institution of the family. He's a very dangerous politician, but the fact that he can be this successful is indicative of his peers and the direction for the state of California, which unfortunately is very, very dark.
I want to look at this law, how it might be interpreted by a judge, for example. If we have a custody dispute and one of the parents wants to send the child to a Catholic or parochial school, and the other is wanting to send the child to a public school, will that figure in somehow? Will the judge be able to use that, saying, well, the Catholic school isn't going to teach proper gender identity, and therefore, if they're going to a Catholic school, we can't get custody?
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is a likely factor, and it's a major factor. Right now we see, in terms of where a child goes to schooling, when you have two parents disagreeing, right now we already see a clear bias by most judges against religious schools or Catholic schools in favor of inferior secular public schools. And of course, in California, they're a joke. If a child goes to a public school in California, the odds are more likely than not that they're going to be illiterate, literally illiterate. That's what the stats show. And yet judges are willing and prone to put their child to side with a parent who wants the child in a secular, radical, left-promoting public school over a highly academically successful, statistically, and moral Catholic school.
Okay, we're talking about the schools, and one of the things I want to ask you about the schools, Brad, is there is now a big controversy with the state now forcing schools to lie to parents about what their children are saying and doing as far as gender identity in school.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is not a rogue school we're talking about. This is policy being pushed by the teachers' unions all across the United States. That is, they want public schools to lie to parents, for teachers to lie to parents about the gender confusion that their child might be experiencing in public school. So when the child is with their parents, say for open house, the school will refer to the child based on the biological name, the original, the name that the child has. But then when the parents are gone and the child's in public school, they'll refer to the child with a different gender name. Instead, they'll hide things from the parents. They'll lie to the parents. This is the protocol being pushed and encouraged by the teachers' union-dominated school boards, which are the overwhelming majority of the school boards across the nation. Even many politicians, unfortunately, are also supportive of this, who are from the left, who are liberal, who are a part of a liberal political party that's very strong in the United States. That's what their agenda is to undermine parental rights, and we're going to see this not decrease anytime soon, but only increase, and that's why we at Pacific Justice Institute are addressing it ever so aggressively.
And not only what they're doing with the kids, they're destroying the family, as well as, I guess, hurting the kids, because after the indoctrination from teachers, what kid is going to trust his parents anymore?
Oh, exactly, and that's a part of their movement, which is to undermine parents. Their ideology and rationalizing of lying to parents is that parents are dangerous. Mm-hmm. Parents can be hurtful and harmful to children. And they almost presume, and effectively they presume, that parents will be harmful to children if they find out that the child has gender identity confusion or dysphoria. Their presumption with this policy is that parents are dangerous for kids in this situation, and they must protect the child from their inherently presumed dangerous parents. This ideology isn't something they keep to themselves. This is the ideology that they convey to the children, and in their alleged efforts to, quote, protect the children from their presumably dangerous and harmful and Neanderthalic mindset parents. That's the ideology, and we've actually seen this argued. I've seen it argued myself before the Kern County Board of Education by public school teachers, radical leftist public school teachers who are part of the LGBTQ themselves, who are pushing and promoting this ideology to justify lying to parents. It is disgraceful, but unfortunately, this is what they're doing, and it's widespread across America. If parents have not pulled their children out of public school yet, this alone should be a major reason for doing so because of its widespread application in our government schools.
And we know from centuries that allowing a child or encouraging a child to keep secrets from their parents is the first step in grooming them. Our country was so adamant about not allowing that to ever happen to a child, and now we're just promoting it. It seems backwards.
Yeah, it does seem very backwards, and yet it's very widespread. And I also want to note that, unfortunately, that there are private schools out there, religious schools, unfortunately even, Catholic schools, where we see this creeping in, this kind of teaching and ideology into those schools. So I encourage parents, if they're going to have their child, take their child and put them into a private religious school or Catholic school, they need to check that school out and make sure that school is one where the teachers and the clergy are truly respectful of the canons of the Catholic faith and are not divergent with some new ideology that's comporting with the LGBTQ movement. We see this as very problematic. Private religious schools like the Episcopals, I'd say, are probably the worst that we have found. That sometimes can be even worse than public schools when it comes to pushing and promoting these kinds of ideologies. But no matter what the denomination, no matter what the traditional doctrine of that religion of that school, parents need to check it out to make sure that they are true to the professed faith, and that is very important as we've seen time and time again.
I guess the bottom line here is if you want to be in control, you have to take control.
Yes, yeah, exactly, and not just blindly trust anyone or anything in this regard. If you find for example, a Catholic school that is respectful of the canons of the Catholic faith and are true to the Catholic faith, then you can be rest assured that you're not going to experience this kind of horrific and grooming and indoctrination taking place in public schools. But make no mistake, parents should not assume anything. They need to be engaged, and they need to put their children first. Public schools have become spiritual death camps across the country, and parents need to respond accordingly.
Yeah.
So Pacific Justice is very good at their website, from what I remember. I haven't looked at recently, but there are educational materials for parents, for policymakers, for lawyers, obviously. How can we find more information about what things to look for in our schools?
I would go to our website, pji.org, look under parents' rights. We have, opt-out forms. We have customized information for parents on a number of different issues, and also to get our legal insider updates on our cases. That's how parents, I think, it's a great way for them to keep up with what's actually happening. What's the next front that's having to deal with that's going to challenge their rights as parents, as particularly parents of faith and of the Catholic faith. This is real important for parents to be equipped. God doesn't want us to have our head in the sand. He commands us in 2 Timothy chapter 3 to be watchful in all things. That is so applicable today, and we encourage people to take advantage of those resources to be watchful at pji.org.
And could we find information about the Iowa office there, how to contact the Iowa office for those people in our listening area?
Yeah, and it's really easy to do that. They can just email PJI if they want information or they have an issue in Iowa, or if they want to call our main number, they can do that too. That's easy to do, which is 916-857-6900. We have a phone system where it links all of our offices together. You just call that main number, and they'll switch you right to the Iowa attorney as is needed with regard to legal issues and representation, always without charge. 916-857-6900.
Right, you mentioned it was without charge. Somebody has to pay for all of this, and so we would encourage anybody that has some spare change that wants to send them your way to do that, because that certainly is helping fight the war here.
Yes, we're a nonprofit 501c3 legal organization, and everyone's donations is fully tax deductible.
All right, Brad, I want to thank you for joining us today. We certainly appreciate your time and effort and everything, and we'll keep you in our prayers. And that's pji.org if anybody wants any other information. And Brad Dacus, the president and founder of the Pacific Justice Institute, thank you, and God bless you in your work.
Oh, thank you, and I appreciate what you're doing as well.
Certainly. You're listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio. We will be right back with closing thoughts right after this. We're back. You're still listening to Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio. That is, unless you turned your dial someplace. But we're coming to you live on tape today.
Yeah, so, recorded.
Yeah, interesting show. I hate using that term all the time, but it's pretty true.
Yeah,
it was an interesting program.
I've heard Judicial Watch on a variety of other programming shows and podcasts, and it was a treat to have them here today. Chris Farrell is very. So, in fact, I said at the break that I thought. You too, and your historical background is just amazing to listen to. You lost me and you educated me all at the same time.
Well, like I say, I used to be a reader.
Right.
So I had this stroke, and now I can't read that much.
And the philosophy of Marxism and socialism is very diverse, and it seems to me that those ideologies are infused with deception. It seems to be the underlying term that comes up in terms of being able to manipulate the population.
It actually, when you go back in history and look at it, the Italian Carbonari and all of this other stuff that built up to the Frankfurt School, a lot of it was directed at taking down the church. So
very relevant to our programming in a lot of ways, and important to Catholics, especially as we see more and more attacks against people of faith.
Well, and then what was it? Paul VI said something about the smoke of Satan is in the church. But there are people that are trying to infiltrate the church, and it's going on. It's going on.
You say that. I have not listened to Tucker Carlson since he moved over to Twitter, but for some strange reason, it popped up this weekend, and I was able to listen to the interview he had with the leading conservative candidate. Of course, he doesn't call himself conservative; he's kind of an American conservative. But anyway, he of Argentina, a socialist country from where our Pope has grown and been raised.
We have to understand that's the culture that Francis grew up in.
Right. I mean, it's not his fault sometimes that when we accuse him of saying things or promoting things that might not line up with our conservative Catholic values. But I would encourage people to listen to it because I think you'll have a better understanding of Argentina and the history and socialism, for that matter, and how it's really destroyed that country.
That's right.
So anyway, that was an aside. Sorry.
And then Brad Dacus, our old friend Brad Dacus, he's
from Pacific Justice.
I think he's probably been on more than any single guest over the years that we've been on.
It's because all these things percolate from California. I feel like,
right,
and he's living in and prosecuting right in that and adjudicating right in that land of nuts and fruits
fruits and nuts, yeah. And like I say, we don't know if that's the agricultural product or the political product of California, but that's what it seems like.
Right. So I love having Brad on. I love having him in the state. It scares me to death what he covers because it just seems like we're not. The first segment we talked about how in our population socialism pits one segment of the population against another. And then we have Brad talking about how California is promoting the courts to pit one parent against another parent. And the whole purpose of having the courts involved in our parental and custody disputes is to soften those animosities between the parents and to determine an equitable way to have the child be raised by both parents. And this does completely the opposite.
Well, it's just like so many of these places where if you have a child that is gender confused, that is having problems, and you take them to a therapist, they can't try and cure him. They can't talk to him. You have to talk therapy where they talk out the problem or find out what, they have to affirm his new identity. And if they don't do that, they can lose their licenses. But anyway, we are at the time now, I think, where we are out of time. So
in the name of St. Michael's Novena.
Yes, and we hope everybody is doing that St. Michael's Novena that we talked about a couple of weeks ago.
Signed up for it on CatholicVote.org.
Yeah, and there's a prayer you can say every night or every day, whenever you want to say it, that comes to you in the mail, and it's a very short one, and it does not take a lot of time to do. So we encourage you to do that. But anyway, as we end here, let's end with our Defender's Prayer. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who roam about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Thank you for listening today. Remember, next week is our fall fundraiser, so if you've got some spare change, you want to save it over the weekend for us next week, we would certainly appreciate that. Keep us on the air. And in the meantime, go to church this weekend, take your kids, and have a blessed and peaceful week.
Our freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. Faith on Trial, with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Mano. Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio, iowacatholicradio.com, and the Iowa Catholic Radio app.
Support for Faith on Trial and Iowa Catholic Radio provided in part by Imogene Ingredients.